Well, welcome to the Hero Report. This is our first ever episode. This is Ari Kohen and I'm Matt Langdon. We're going to do a bit of an introduction to start with and then get into some topics of the day, and we'll finish by just discussing what this is going to be going forwards. So, as I said, my name is Matt Langdon. I live in Michigan. I'm from Australia. I have been studying heroes and really the practical application of hero training to kids for the last 5 years. And in the last year or so, I've tried to start branching into adult audiences. I have been working with Doctors Phil Zimbardo and Zeno Franco, who are doing a lot of the lead work in the psychology world on studying heroism. But as I said, my main focus is on kids, teaching them to be heroes. And really, I picked kids because they tend to be open to new ideas, whereas adults tend to think that they already know everything. So I gave myself a bit of a running start with the kid audience. Previous to that, I worked at a camp for 12 years, a YMCA camp that was a year-round camp, and that's where I got my real interest in teaching character to kids. So that's where I am. You can find me at theherocc.com or theherohandbook.com. And over to Ari.
Thanks. My name is Ari Kohen, as Matt said. I am a Schlesinger Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm also the director of the Forsyth Family Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs Program. And I just finished a book project on classical heroism, looking at the way that the hero is portrayed in Homer and also in Platonic dialogues, and arguing essentially for 3 different classical heroic archetypes, which is, funny enough, how Matt and I got started talking about this idea. Because, as Matt said, he lives in Michigan. I live in Nebraska. I'm originally from Michigan, but I've never actually met Matt in person. We've talked on Twitter and Facebook and Google+, and now, of course, we're hanging out. And we have this mutual interest, and hope that this will be a way to sort of engage with others and move this idea of heroic education forward a bit.
And part of what we're going to be doing is getting guest speakers or guest interviews on the shows. We thought we'd start without one for the first week to make sure we knew what we were doing. But Ari, we nearly met once in Chicago, which is about as close as we've gotten. But one day we'll fix that up. So we wanted to start the first show by talking about the events around the Costa Concordia, the cruise liner that it didn't quite sink, but it hit the coast and needed to be evacuated.
Yeah, and Matt, you had a really interesting article that you published online with Zeno Franco on the sort of actions of the captain, and I wonder if that's something that you can talk about for a few minutes to sort of tell us, especially, of course, people who haven't read the piece yet, and we'll try to link to it when we publish this podcast, but just tell us a little bit about what you wrote and sort of your thinking about the captaincy and heroism or lack thereof.
Right. Well, the piece was for Greater Good magazine, which is out of Berkeley, and really what made the story was the actions of the captain, and it was because the captain's actions really went against everything we expect from the captain of a ship. And there's a lot of talk in heroism about duty-bound heroism. So that is people that do something that objectively would be called heroic, but they're doing it because it is their duty to do so. That gets talked a lot about in relation to firefighters and police officers and soldiers and that sort of thing. And it certainly applies in this case. And people, the media, being the media, would almost certainly have been calling the captain a hero if he had stayed on the boat until everyone was off. But other captains would have said that was what was expected and that was normal behavior. So heroism often is something that goes beyond what the expectations are. And we all have different levels of expectation. So the expectations for a cruise liner's captain are higher than the expectations of a cruise liner passenger. So we would expect certain things to be done by the captain. His actions, which were essentially to get off the ship as soon as he felt he was in danger and hail a taxi once he got to land, has been quite rightly lambasted around the world, and particularly in Italy. The Italians are dealing with a recent overthrow of their highly corrupt Prime Minister, Berlusconi. And you know that a lot of the common Italians really resent that idea that it's a corrupt country and they're looking for people who step up and above. And this guy really showed that he did not at all. And a lot of praise then was given to the Coast Guard, who got in contact with this Captain Schettino and basically told him to get back on the boat in no uncertain terms. And he now is the proud owner of a catchphrase that is on T-shirts all across Italy. And his conversation with the captain was really illuminating as to the captain's motives. He said, "I can't go back up on there because it's very dark, because it's slanted." I mean, just some really horrible behaviors. And so, you know, a lot of people ask the question, what would you do? It's easy to pour disdain on this guy, but it's hard to answer the question of what you would do. So the article really focused on him, but then also on just the different ways that he failed in heroism, but then finished with the idea that there were a lot of people on the ship that did perform heroically. And you know, I'd love to talk a little bit more about those today, but what's your reaction being to the story, Ari?
Well, the thing, the thing that's most interesting to me, of course, is what you brought up there at the end, this idea that, he had a number of reasons that he trotted out for why he couldn't do what we all feel like he ought to have done. I'm always really interested in sort of the thought process that goes on in people's minds when confronted with a really challenging situation, one that has a personal risk, and where that sort of the decision that they take is one of these sort of make or break decisions, right? It often happens really quickly. Not a lot of time to think about it, making the wrong decision, as you I think point out really nicely, it means people will be talking about what you did in a negative way for quite some time. Making the right decision, doing the difficult thing, the challenging thing, again means people will be talking about you for some time in a positive light. So it's really interesting to hear these justifications, right? But I always wonder, and it would be one of those sort of fascinating things to find out, what was the person, what was this captain really thinking, right? What drove him to what is essentially a dereliction of duty, right? It's a different kind of heroic story or non-heroic story because there is this duty element. And I guess that's one thing I think I'd be really interested in talking a little bit more about. When there's this duty component, how does that color the way we think about heroism? Right action is something that you should undertake simply because it's right. Now, the captain in this case, doesn't do the right thing and doesn't feel himself to be particularly duty-bound either as the ship's captain. So there's like a double failing in some sense here. There's a personal failing, and then there's the occupational failing, if you will. But I wonder, both, I wonder obviously what he tells himself, and then I wonder what we think about heroism that is so tied to duty, right? How does our understanding of what someone is required to do because of the occupation they've chosen, for example, how does that interact with our sort of doling out accolades to that person? Right.
And Zeno and I talked a bit about this the idea of what he was thinking. And I think it would be pretty easy to understand and I'm not pretending to know that this is what happened, but I could easily put myself in the situation where I was in a responsible position, and I had done something that I knew was wrong, which he did. He put the boat in danger so I think a friend or a crew member could wave to his family. So he knew he was doing something dangerous, and he was doing something that was wrong, and then bam, he's caught out, and there's no way to get out of this. So there was a long delay between the hitting the rock and actually doing anything about it. There's reports that he ordered his dinner after the rock had been hit, and there's at least 40 minutes between the accident happening and him calling or sounding the alarm. There's also video of a crew member being telling people that the captain had said everything's fine after everyone had their life jackets on and to go back to wherever they were. So there was a long time there for the guy to be worried about his mistake and how can I fix this. And it's understandable that he came to the decision that there was no way to fix it, and he wanted to get out of there. And I think that's pretty easy to understand. Not justified, but pretty easy to understand the thought processes, because there was a lot of time to make the decision on what to do. And the fact that he got into a taxi straight away, that tells me that he was intending to get out of there and get away from the whole situation. So I think that's very human and unfortunate because of the position he was in.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we'll probably end up emphasizing quite a lot as we go through this series of discussions and interviews over time. It's always easy to point the finger at the person who does the wrong thing and say, this is the wrong thing, I want to distance myself from that, I would never do that, right? That's not me. I would do the right thing for sure. But of course, presumably the captain thought all of those things just the day or the hour before this terrible accident happened, right? And so it's really important, I think, as we go forward, we'll probably end up repeating this a number of times. So bear with us, anyone who's watching this. We all have the benefit of being outside of the situation, right? And so it's always easy to say, well, this is the obvious correct thing, or this is the moral thing, and that's what we all would have done, right, if we were presented with a situation. But unfortunately, in the real world, it doesn't work like that. We may find ourselves in a really trying situation, and we might even know what the right thing to do is and still be really hard-pressed to do it. And I think that's one of the things that's most interesting to explore for both of us, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. That is, how do you prepare people, in some sense, to make those decisions, which are so often really snap decisions? Things that have to happen really quickly, so that it's almost a kind of second nature to do the thing that we all regard as the right thing, that we all hope that we would be able to do. And I think that's one of the puzzles that I think we'll end up talking about pretty often.
I think we can have at least one whole episode on that that question by itself. You're absolutely right. One of the most intriguing things about people that do heroic things in a short time, in a snap decision, is that they almost always tell the media, whoever's there reporting what happened, that they did what anyone else would have done. And it's a clear falsehood. It's staring them even right in the face, and it's staring all of us right in the face. It's staring the reporter in the face, that clearly it is not something that everybody would have done, because there were people around who didn't do it. And that's one of the very interesting, I think, psychology pieces for me too. What is the psychology that makes us deny that we've done something amazing? Which is something we can discuss further. But one of the the things about the Concordia is that it gives us lots of good examples as well. And I'm a big fan of providing positive examples rather than negative examples. And
well, why don't you give us one or two?
Yeah, right. Well, one of I just read this one today, was one of the girls, I think 19 years old, who was working in the childcare part of the ship. And there's thousands of people on the ship, and there's they're like little cities. That one of the girls had 30 kids that she found herself with, and got them back to all their parents. And that was what she did. She said, well, there's 23, so I'm looking at the article now. She'd been watching these kids, and there were 23 of them, and her response was to get them back to her parents. Now, the human and understandable thing to do would be to get out of the ship and save yourself, right? But she spent time finding where these parents were and got each of those 23 back to where they belong. The other duty-bound piece was there was an off-duty captain who I think captained the sister ship, who, again, he wasn't even on duty, but he did what you would expect a captain to do. He took over and took charge. There, and then some of the other crew members, the purser and people like that, were actively helping evacuate the ship. So even in the face of quite a bit of danger, and I think was it the purser who went missing? The ship's purser, yeah, he was helping load the lifeboats. He was searching the decks for people to make sure everyone was. Well, not everyone, but people were trying to get people out, and he broke his leg and was trapped under the ship, and he got out. But that's an example of someone who understands their duty and performs it, even at risk to themselves.
So let me push you on this for just a minute, and we'll see where it leads us. It may just lead us to the end of our short podcast for today. Do we think differently? I really want to sort of press on this idea of doing one's duty as being heroic in some way, right? Is there something less heroic about it simply because it is one's duty? In other words, I mean, think about the ship's personnel who actually did what they were supposed to do as the crew of a ship, or think of the off-duty captain who assumed, in some sense, the role of the captain, right? It's impressive behavior, no doubt, right? And we're happy that they did it. We're glad that they were there. They made a difference, and all those things. Is it heroic to do the thing that, in some sense, you're called to do, or you signed up to do when you took on that job?
Right. I think I'm on your side here. I think signing up for a job that involves risk means that taking that risk doesn't involve heroism. And there's lots of examples of that type of job in soldiers and firefighters, as I said before. But it's that level of doing more than what's expected. So, a firefighter who goes back into a building and rescues someone when they were told not to, when their instructions were to not do that, that is going above our expectations. Now, it might be stupid as well, and certainly, those rules or those directions would exist for a reason to keep the firefighter safe. But the reality is, if that firefighter was successful, and I think that's a key part of heroism as well, is you need to be successful, that you saw the eyebrows there.
We may have some interesting discriminations going forward about that, which will be great.
But you have to rise above it. And there's last year, I think, there was a huge argument online on Facebook, and there were different Facebook groups on soldiers, heroes. And the question was kind of flawed. But people were arguing that if someone was a soldier, then they were a hero. Soldier equals hero. And we know that I mean, if you can be logical about it and objective about it, you know that they're people, and they have more chances to be heroic than the average person, but they don't become a hero just by signing up. It may be that they made a heroic choice to sign up. But it also may be that they wanted to get their college paid for. It may be that they wanted to kill people. I mean, we don't know what all the different motivations were. Are there heroic soldiers? Absolutely. Do we hear about a lot of them? Yes, we do, and we do because they're in these situations that are way beyond what our normal life is like. Is a captain a hero for staying on the ship? I don't think so. Is a child's 19-year-old, probably getting paid $5 or $3 an hour to be on a ship looking after kids, a hero for making sure those 23 kids got back? I'd say yes. I'd say she didn't sign up to be a rescue officer on a ship, whereas I think those full-time staff certainly did, the purser, the captain. So I think there are opportunities for heroism within a duty-bound position, but often it's just doing your duty. If you're putting a fire out and you're a firefighter, that's what you should be doing. If you're putting a fire out and you're a 10-year-old kid, that's not what you should be doing.
Right, and the interesting thing, of course, is that if we think that through, what that suggests is, just as you say, there are like more opportunities for heroism for someone in this line of more dangerous work. It's also the case that there are a lot more opportunities for failure, right?
Absolutely.
So that there are more occasions where you're expected to do something, but it's a very dangerous thing that you're expected to do. And the chances that you might not perform the way that most people would want you to, are there. And that's what makes those professions obviously a special calling in some sense. I wouldn't want to sign on for a situation where performance of a dangerous duty doesn't mean heroism, but non-performance means that I open myself up to all manner of criticism for the foreseeable future, right?
Yep.
It's a real well, I don't want to say it's a catch-22, but it's a real challenge, and it's a distinct type of person who does that, I think, and worthy of praise when they do what we need them to do, what they've signed on to do, whether we can call it heroism or not.
Absolutely, and like I said, I think that the choice to join that profession can be a heroic choice, but it doesn't. That action can be heroic, but it doesn't guarantee you a hero status for the rest of your life. There has to be more.
Well, I should say we're creeping up on our half hour, and there are a few housekeeping things we should attend to for anyone who happens to watch this inaugural podcast before we sign off. So I think the first thing to say, of course, is that we'll be doing these weekly. And thanks to the magic of Google+, we're able to broadcast them live and also to record them so that people can watch them at their leisure. So the idea will be that we will record these weekly on Friday afternoons at 4 o'clock Eastern. And that then those will be made available the following, do we say Monday or Tuesday?
Monday night or Tuesday.
Yeah, Monday night or Tuesday morning, and they'll be available in a number of places. Initially, I think they'll be available on both of our blogs or websites. Yours, if you'll tell people again, is?
theherohandbook.com.
Okay, and mine, I blog at kohenari.net. And you'll also be able to find them on YouTube. They'll be on Google+, and shortly they will be housed on their own website as well. The other thing, maybe you'll talk for just a minute about the sort of social networking aspect that we'd like to introduce going forward.
Yeah, well, we'd like to get your input on what you'd like to hear. We'd also like to hear your responses to some of the controversial things that Ari says. And so we're going to be broadcasting this on Twitter. They'll be on our website as well, where you can leave comments on either of our sites. And you can leave comments on the Google Plus area as well. And so comments on the show that's just been, but also requests for conversations or topics in the news that you've seen that you'd like us to discuss. We'll be collecting stories as we see them during the week to go over. Suggestions for guests or nominating yourself as a guest. We'd like to have a guest each week. And obviously, you spreading it if you think it's something that is worth watching for other people that you know. We'd love you to share it with others. So that would be the social piece. Up to you.
Great. I think that's probably what we'll say for our inaugural episode. We'll undoubtedly have forgotten things, and so our next episode will probably include some housekeeping as well. But going forward, we have some guests lined up. We're hoping, of course, to take your suggestions, as Matt said, for other guests or other topics. There's always heroism in the news, which is part of why we're both so drawn to this topic, because it's really all around us, and thinking critically about it really makes a great deal of sense. So we're hoping to provide a way to do that, and also, of course, to engage with people who are already thinking about this topic in the ways that we are, but also in different ways. It'll be interesting to explore the differences that we have, Matt and I, and also, of course, to hear from you and from others about differences of opinion or agreement, or just really anything that strikes you. So hope that you will all be in touch. And Matt, thanks for this. This was a great, I think, a great first session, and we'll see how things go going forward.
Good. Yeah, we'll see everyone next time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt.